I will call the November 5th, 2020 Planning Commission to order. Will everyone please stand? And Commissioner Lowry, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Staff, roll call, please.
All commissioners are present this evening with the exception of Secretary Kleiman, who has been excused this evening.
Great, thank you. All right, this is public comments, and the time we take the public comments on matters that are not on the agenda, that are generally within the purview of the Planning Commission. If you wish to speak, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Please call 949-270-8165 now to provide public comments on non-agenda items. And first, we'll go to the community room. Do we have any public comments on non-agenda matters? Seeing none, I will move to the phone. Anything on the phone? Okay, great. Next item is request for continuances. Staff, are there any requests for continuances tonight?
Mr. Chair, there are no requests for continuances.
Great. Moving on to consent items. Item number 1 are the minutes of the October 22nd, 2020 meeting. If you want to comment on this item, again, that's 949-270-8165. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners or in the community room? I believe there were some adjusted minutes from Mr. Mosier as well. And anyone on the phone? Okay. All right, I'll call for the motion in a second, please.
I'll motion approve.
I'll second.
And do you guys want to add in Mr. Mosier's amended minutes?
Excuse me, with Mr. Mosier's request.
Perfect.
I'll second that.
Okay, call for the vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. All right, discussion items. These are the public hearing items. Item number 2, circulation element update status report. This is a site location that is citywide. This is a discussion item for everyone to become more informed about the circulation element update and the process. Staff, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Weigand. Today I wanted to do a really quick, brief presentation here, really centered on what is coming up for the Planning Commission and the community about the circulation element. As you know, we've been working on the housing and circulation element for the past year or so, and we're now going out to the community and seeking some public input. So what's coming up here this month is on November 19th, we're going to do a study session here with the Planning Commission. So we're going to have a kind of an introductory circulation element 101 with the commission. So Mr. Bryan, our traffic engineer, will be participating, and our consultants as well. And I'll also be part of that presentation. So again, we're going to be doing a 101, if you will, an introduction, kind of going over what's in the circulation element. And obviously the community will be able to participate and provide comment. On November 23rd, we're going to have a virtual workshop, and that the subject of that virtual workshop, it'll be done by Zoom, and it'll also be the same basic content, and within that we will also have opportunities for the public to provide comment directly to staff, and we'll try to engage and respond to those comments where necessary. So those 2 items are coming up this month. So I've already kind of touched upon those first 2 there, but we have some additional items coming up in December and January. So on December 15th, I know the slide says tentative, but we're going to really try our best to hold that. We're going to do a virtual workshop, our second circulation element workshop. We're going to be going over the key themes of the existing element, and then trying to educate the community on, we're going to take a little deeper dive, if you will, on all the items that are in the circulation element. And then we'll obviously be taking some additional public comments. We're going to do a second workshop on the 16th, and the purpose again is to get back and do that deep dive on the circulation element. It is a fairly technical document. There's a lot in there, for mobility policies, the master plan of streets and highways, transportation demand management. There's just a lot in there, including parking. And so we felt we couldn't do it in one workshop. We're going to do it in two. And these are going to be virtual workshops with the community. And we'll be sending out a lot of information virtually, through Nextdoor and other social media events. We'll be publishing notices in the pilot for this as well, and on our website, and doing email blasts and the like to try to really drive people to come to these. And so we're going to be taking that feedback. Now, when we do that deep dive, we're setting ourselves up for a future virtual study session. A future virtual workshop in January, where we're actually going to start to talk about what we want the future of our mobility to look like. How are we going to address future technologies and the like? And so that will be again a much more forward-looking workshop in January. So I've gone over all of that. The only other item I wanted to let everyone know about is we do have our housing element update advisory committee meetings. This is really talking about housing now. I just wanted to take this opportunity, since I've got the floor, to let everyone know about the housing workshops that we're also doing. On November 16th and 17th, we're going to be going over site suitability, where we might, we'll be looking at different geographies in the community. And I do have a flyer here that I passed out, which explains a little bit more about this here. So, so I wanted to let everyone know that on Monday and Tuesday, November 16th and 17th, we'll be doing housing workshops, and then a housing element update advisory committee on December 2nd. And so these are those two workshops. Again, so site suitability analysis. We're going to be really asking the community for feedback on what types of densities and building forms we might like to see or might accept. In the airport area, we'll be looking at other areas of town, and we're breaking this up into two workshops because, again, the city's quite a large place. So then this is the workshop flyer here that I've got that shows both the housing element and the circulation element workshops that we're doing here by the end of the year. And so we have copies of that for everyone. It'll be available. We're doing a media blitz to drive people to these, and hopefully we'll get some good turnout. So we look forward to having the community at these future workshops. So that's really the gist of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions to ask? Yes.
It's not a question, it's just a report back to the commission. I had since I'm the circulation planning commissioner coordinator, I had a meeting on the phone with 3 other of the committee members, and I got immersed in what's going on and what we're trying to do and how we're going to try to present it. So that will build and build again and build again. So we'll get there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Ketting, for stepping into the role. Appreciate it. Any other commissioners with questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I didn't have that question that
one
a constituent had reached out.
We did get that late email from Mr. David Tanner, kind of asking the question, what's our plan to do with ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and how that relates to the circulation element. Part of our housing policy will involve some ADUs. We don't know how many ADUs we might be planning for. The process to develop those policies will kind of give us that guidance over the next couple of months. But what I would say is that whatever that assumption is, whether it be 200, 300, 1,000 units, whatever it is, we're going to be evaluating that as part of our project and part of the EIR. And we'll be looking at the vehicle miles traveled and looking at whether there's any level of service impacts. And so we will be addressing that and to ensure that our circulation plan, if you will, can accommodate that level of growth. So we will be looking at it.
Great, thank you. I'll go to the take public comment now on that on this item? And again, if you're watching remotely and wanted to provide comments, please dial 949-270-8165. I'll go to the community room first for any public comments on this item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone on the phone. Okay. All right, I will just double check with commissioners. Anyone, any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you all. And now it is time to move on to our public hearing items. This is item number 3, the residents at 4400 Von Carmen, PA 2020-061. That's the site location of 4400 Von Carmen Avenue. And I believe there might be some recusals on this one.
Yeah, Chair, I need to recuse myself from this item. I have 2 colleagues that lease the office building adjacent to the site.
Great, thank you.
And I'll have to also recuse myself, equity membership in the Pacific Club, which is in the sphere of influence there. So.
Great, thank you. Staff, just one question before our commissioners excuse themselves. Is it appropriate that they can leave, or should we move to your last agenda item so that they can hear them? Is there anything of importance that would be necessary to have that community development? I could skip over to there, or should we just excuse our commissioners for the
I think we could go ahead and excuse the commissioners.
Okay, yeah, you guys are free to go. Thank you for participating. It was a short agenda for you guys, but it is appreciated that you guys came.
And Chair Weigand, I would also add that with respect to Commissioner Kleiman, unfortunately, she was not able to be here this evening. She has recused herself on a previous iteration of this project, and she does have a source of income with respect to the underlying property owner, so she's recusing herself for this item as well.
Great, great. All right, so it's just our 4, and you're already close enough with your partitions there that we can't space you out, but I think the staff has done a good enough job of sealing us in our bank boxes here. All right, again, if you're watching remotely and want to comment on this item, please call 949-270-8165 after the presentations are over. And staff, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Weigand. Jim Campbell, Deputy Director. I'll be doing the presentation this evening. With me is Rosalind Ung, the Principal Planner, who did a lot of the lion's share of the work here. We have Tony Bryan, Traffic Engineer, to assist any questions. We also have Dana Privet of Kimley Horn, who prepared the addendum and the environmental review for that. So she's also here to answer any questions. Okay, the residents at 4400 Von Carmen Avenue. What this project really is a 312-unit apartment building. There will be some affordable housing in the project. Parking will be also involved, obviously. It is a density bonus project, and that's why the project is 312 units rather than 260. 260 is the base units, which would be otherwise allowed by the general plan. So we have a 1-acre public park that would be dedicated to the city, and there'd be also a 284-space parking structure for the offices. There will also be some reconstruction or reconfiguration of surface parking lots. So I also want to let you know what the application framework is here. We have a planned community development plan amendment. So this is the zoning for the property. We're amending the Cole Center Newport planned community to accommodate this residential project. The Cole Center planned community text does not presently allow for residential, but the general plan does. We have a major site development review application here, so we have a fully designed building for your consideration. So with approval of that, and obviously with the council approval of the legislative action, the planned community development plan amendment, which would happen later, they could move straight to a building permit. We also did a traffic study pursuant to our traffic phasing ordinance. Quick preview, there was no impacts to traffic. There's a lot line adjustment that basically takes the existing lot that the project site is being proposed for, and it adjusts it to match the development that you will see here in a moment. There's also an affordable housing implementation plan, and that's because of the density bonus request. As I said earlier, there is a density bonus of 52 units, which is 20% of the base units. And with that, the applicant will be building and including 5% of the units for very low-income households, and I'll describe that a little bit more detail later. There's also a development agreement that I'll also describe later. So to orient everyone, this is the airport area. It's really bounded by the 73 freeway, Jamboree, and campus. It's up obviously near the John Wayne Airport. MacArthur runs diagonally right through the image, and the star on the that you see there is the project site. Getting a little closer to the ground here, this is the project location. It is part of Kohl Center Newport. It's office site B, I believe. And so you see that large sea of parking, and that's where the project site will actually be located. The buildings that are in the project site within it are not actually part of the project. Again, here's a diagram showing really where the three major components are going. We've got the blue area where the residential building would go. Within that would be parking for the building, as well as office parking. So the green area that you see is the public park that would be included, and that would be dedicated to the city. It's approximately 1 acre. And then that yellow portion is a parking structure, which is there because the proposed park and residential building would take away existing parking that's there, and so this would replace the parking so that we would not be losing any parking once the project is completed. The general plan for the area, the salmon color that you see there is mixed use horizontal 2, and that provides for the horizontal intermixing of uses. Regional commercial office, multifamily, residential, vertical mixed use buildings, industrial hotel rooms. 2,200 residential units is allowed. The project site is designated there in red. So the point I want to stress here is that the residential units are allowed within this entire designation, 2,200 units, and that does not include density bonus units. I want to kind of take a step back in time here. This is the integrated conceptual development plan that was approved by the City Council back in 2010. And this is a required element of our general plan. It requires this plan. And the two major property owners, which at the time was Connexent, which became Uptown Newport, and the coal companies worked together to develop this plan. And so what this is this is the evolution of planning in the airport area from the general plan itself that introduced residential uses in that mixed-use horizontal 2 area that I showed earlier, and we went to this level of planning. Again, this was a conceptual plan, and it basically allocated the units as you see in the table there. 260 units was allocated to the coal site, and 290 units were allocated to the Uptown site, which is called the Connexent site there. And those are really what we call the additive units that would be just completely added to the general plan. The other units that you see there are basically come at the expense of existing commercial or industrial development. Those are called the replacement units. And density bonus does not factor into that. So the point I wanted to show this is that this plan, this project has been in the works. It does occupy a portion of the project site. It's basically in the same location as what was contemplated here. The park is flipped on the other side of the building than what you see here, but all the essential components of this plan are in the plan before you today. And it is a conceptual plan. It doesn't require that this project that you see here tonight is identical to it. It just means it needs to be in substantial conformance to it, but it has to have all of those critical elements, and we'll be going through that here in a moment. So I do want to touch base on, there was a prior project here. The Planning Commission had a study session. It was the Kohl Center residential residences. It was a 260-unit project. It did not include affordable housing or a density bonus. It had 3 residential towers. It had commercial and a 1-acre public park. And it had a freestanding parking structure in basically the same location that you'll see today for this project. And that project was withdrawn. I think the applicant is going to be touching a little bit upon some of the differences between those two projects, because obviously we heard from the community that the size of that project just wasn't what the community was really thinking about, and this project does reflect some changes in response to that dialogue. So I want to go through, I've listed here in the bullet points here some of the policies of the general plan that require future projects in the area to have to comply with, and that's that MUH2 land use category. The project is consistent with the densities and intensities that are anticipated. The project site is 44 dwelling units per acre, and it has to be within the 30 to 50 range. We have a 10-acre village. We have a 13-acre project here. The conceptual development plan was approved, and you saw that earlier. The regulatory plans are required, and what that really means is that before the regulatory plan comes into place, the residential use isn't even allowed, and so the general plan requires that a regulatory plan come forward. Now, in Uptown Newport, we saw that regulatory plan with a planned community text for that project. Here, we've got an amendment to the Kohl Center Newport planned community development plan, And I'll outline a little bit about what that does, but we do have that regulatory plan here tonight, and so it's consistent with that policy. The development agreements are required, and we do have one proposed for your consideration and recommendation to council. A neighborhood park is required, and that is included in this project. Basically, it requires an 8% of the project site to be dedicated. It's roughly about 1 acre, and we do have that with us in this project. The general plan requires recreational amenities. They are included in the design, and I'll show you some of it, and the applicant will also show you some of it. The general plan requires connected and walkable streets, and it is provided in this design, and we'll show you some of those diagrams. There are walking paths that will lead you throughout the project site, including some connections to the Uptown Newport project, which was anticipated with the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan. Building massing. What the policy basically says is that you can't have a high-rise building right up against the street, and we don't have that here, so we are consistent. This is not a high-rise type of project. We really are looking at a 5-story building, and we'll show you that in a moment. Parking, the parking is replaced, and so, there is a construction management plan that we require and a parking management plan. There will be some shortfalls during the construction, but that'll be addressed through the parking management plan. But at the end of the day, when the dust settles, all the parking will be replaced. And also, the general plan requires sustainability, and that is included in the proposed design as well. So moving forward, I do want to show you this slide. This kind of gives you an allocation of where the airport area residential units are and how they've been allocated and entitled. So the Uptown Newport project, Newport Crossings, and the Newport Airport Village project have all been entitled. We still have 430 units remaining in the general plan, and that's factoring in this project. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight this for the community. We have these units that are currently in the general plan, and this is one of the reasons why this project does not require a general plan amendment, because the general plan has planned for these units. And so we still have some work left to do with those units. Real quick on the project, this is the view from the main entry. It's a podium-style project, which means there's a concrete deck there with parking and some office areas on the ground floor, leasing areas and other amenities. Then we have 4 levels of residential uses above. Overall project height is about 71 feet and no higher than that. It is a modern design, kind of reflective of the modern architecture that's in the airport area with the office buildings that surround it. So this is the Birch Street elevation. So this is the site plan. So the gray area that you see is the first level of the building. It's really a parking garage. And so you have the leasing office on the ground floor, and then you have a driveway down the center, which is where the residents would primarily be entering the site. You see a driveway called the internal street on the bottom of the diagram, and that will actually be open to the public. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Kohl Center Newport. All of the parking areas there are controlled, so you have to go through a control arm, and they're controlled, and you might have to pay for the parking, and you might get validated. All of the parking in that area will still remain controlled, but this new street here, which lines up with the existing driveway that's there, will be open to the public, and that's part of the general plan requirement, that we have this public access through the project site. And so that internal street runs from Von Karman Avenue over to Birch, over on the right-hand side of the diagram. So the building's in gray, and you see the park there to the top of the diagram, and you see some existing office buildings also that are there. And we'll show you what that looks like in a moment. So this is the second level of the building. It's going on, this is on top of the podium, and the reason I show this, and I'll be describing it a little bit more in detail, is that there are some amenities there. We have some outdoor courtyards with a pool area, and then there's kind of a central courtyard on the right-hand side of the diagram that provides other amenities for the residents. So in this development, again, 312 units, 55 studios, 149 one-bedrooms, and 108 two-bedroom units. So we have 13 affordable units, and 299 are market rate rentals. So the affordable mix is 3 studios, 9 one-bedrooms, and 1 two-bedroom unit. And that's important because it's a different ratio than what the rest of the project is, and the applicant is seeking relief. Our code requires that the affordable mix be the same as the mix for the rest of the project, and it's not. What's really happening here is we have more studios and one-bedrooms than the rest of the project. And so that's a development concession that the applicant is asking for. It makes the project more financially viable because it provides a smaller they gain more revenue for the project, and it makes it financially viable. They are entitled to that type of a consideration with the affordability that they're providing in the project. So it's a rectangular-shaped podium-style project, as I showed you, 4 stories over 1 level of parking. There will be 2 levels of parking below grade. It'd be, as I said, 71 feet in overall height. Project parking in the residential building itself and along the spine street or the internal street, there'll be 835 parking spaces. And that will be for the residences and for the office users who are nearby. So almost 559 spaces for residents and guests, and we have 276 spaces for the office users. Because you remember, there's a big office pool there that this project would be displacing, and so then we're creating proximate parking for those office users. As I indicated, there is that parking structure that would be over there on the far kind of southeastern corner. It's 284 spaces, 4 levels, about 40 feet in height. It's really not subject to public view. It's over in the corner there. You really won't see it as you drive on Carmen or Birch. Let's say on-site amenities, as I kind of mentioned in that one slide, there'll be a pool courtyard on the 2nd level, a garden courtyard on the 2nd level, club room, fitness rooms, bike shop storage on the ground floor, a dog wash room, and there'll be a roof terrace as well and private balconies for most of the units. So we have these amenities, which again are in requirements of the general plan, but they're also necessary to create a nice living environment. So those on-site amenities, as I pointed out, are there in the diagram, and then the park is directly to the north. So the neighborhood park, I do want to touch upon the neighborhood park because the park is not one large rectangular parcel that you saw, and I want to make sure everyone understands that it does actually meet the general plan policies, policies 61513, sorry for the typo there, and 61514. And those bullet points there are the key components of the policies. I didn't want to bring the policy here for you to read, but those are the key components of the policies. And the park complies with each one of those. And here is that public park. Again, the residential building is on the bottom of the diagram, kind of grayed out, and the office buildings are on the top part of the diagram. So we have, it's over 150 feet on Von Carmen and obviously 150 feet in length between there and Birch. It is public in character, and it has amenities, a bocce court, active and passive recreation, and landscaping. So we think it'll be a nice amenity. Now the design of the park, the applicant will be showing this to the PB&R Commission in December, and then they will include that recommendation when this project goes to council in early 2021. Again, the park will be approximately 1 acre. It'll be dedicated to the city. The city will own the land. Now, it'll be improved and maintained by the applicant. It'll include those active and passive amenities that I mentioned, and as I said, it'll be going to the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission in December. I want to highlight a couple of items that are important, that really integrates this project to the Kohl Center Newport area. It also connects it to Kohl Center. The Integrated Conceptual Development Plan, while I didn't highlight it there, it did have these connections that I want to point out to you here. There are a series of walkways that are in the diagrams and in the plan sets that you have that will allow any of the office users or the public or the residents just to walk through that public park area and walk around the buildings and enjoy the environment. There's also 3 pedestrian connections that are being created, and they are highlighted in that kind of light blue color there, that would connect Kohl Center Newport to the Phase 2 of Uptown Newport, which is on the right-hand side of that diagram in the middle. And so these will be pathways so that the residents and office users can kind of freely go back and forth between Uptown Newport and the Kohl Center Newport. Because in Uptown Newport, there will be some commercial amenities and 2 1-acre parks, and this will allow the connectivity, and this is what the general plan requires, and it is included in the project. I want to touch upon construction phasing. There's basically 2 phases, or basically one. The first phase is the freestanding parking structure. So the plan is before we take out that big parking field in Phase 2A, where the residential building and the park would go, we're going to build that 284-space parking structure. And it's going to take about probably 6 months. Then from there, we'll start in on the actual construction of the residential building, and that's Phase 2A. That'll take approximately 24 months. That's the residential building and the park. And then phase two would be, 2B, I should say, is, I apologize, I got a typo on there, but phase 2B in that red area is the reconfiguration of that small parking lot there. And that might be concurrent with the construction of the building. And so overall, it'll take about 32 months to construct. The Cole Center Newport Plan Community Development Amendment creates a residential overlay in blue for the residential building, the park overlay for the park. It also creates development standards and allowed uses for the overall project that I've been describing to you. And so that's really the nature of the amendment, of the zoning amendment, that regulatory plan that I mentioned earlier that the general plan requires. And so that's in your packet as one of the attachments to the resolution. So the site development review, again, we have a fully designed project conceptually, and it is consistent with the proposed overlay in the general plan. We feel the building is compatible with the area. It has the project amenities that the general plan would require, and we feel that all the findings can be made for the approval of the building. And those findings are contained in the resolution for your consideration this evening. I mentioned earlier a traffic study pursuant to the traffic phasing ordinance. And so the morning and evening peak hour traffic at 25 intersections in Irvine and in Newport Beach were reviewed. It was done under the preparation of the traffic engineer, Mr. Brine. Kimley Horn was the contractor who did that. And you can see that the average daily trips there and the AM and PM trips. And I think the takeaway here is there was no significant impacts. We have no diminishments of service that would take it over the limits. And so we are consistent with the traffic phasing ordinance. I mentioned there was a lot line adjustment. Maybe I'll kind of flash through this, but what's really going on is they're just adjusting the existing lot to match the existing development, or the development that's being proposed here. So the new lot will be 4.51 acres. That does include the park site, which actually will be subdivided later and then dedicated to the city. Density bonus project and the affordable housing implementation plan. As I mentioned, we have 13 units that would be allocated for very low income households, and that it really is 50% of the area median is the target. And the applicant is seeking a 20% increase in density, those 52 units. And so those 13 units would be restricted for 55 years to those income levels. And as I mentioned, they're asking consideration for a higher allocation of studios and one bedrooms, and that is a development incentive request, and it makes the project financially viable, and the applicant is entitled to this kind of consideration, and so we do recommend that approval. Development agreement. So that's in your packet. The term is 10 years. There are no options for extensions. There is a public benefit fee that the applicant would be paying to the city in the sum of $7,500,000, and $6 million of that would be payable when the project is vested, which is very early. It's before the building permits are issued. So that's kind of a unique feature. There's an additional public safety fee that would be used for fire life safety staffing or services or equipment. And that's really the basic points that are there, but if you have any questions, obviously we're here to assist you in that. Again, we are looking for a recommendation to the council for approval of the entire package, including that. Getting close to the end here, we did do the CEQA review. We did prepare an addendum to the general plan update program EIR. So in 2006, we comprehensively updated the general plan. We created the mixed-use horizontal designation that I shared with you, and it allocated the 2,200 units. Now, that EIR actually reviewed 4,400 units. And at the end of the day, the plan was for less units. So we utilized that EIR because this project is fully consistent with all the assumptions of that planning document. And we felt it was appropriate because obviously the project is a little different than what was anticipated. And we went ahead and the addendum, we feel confident that the addendum adequately addresses the environmental impacts of the project. We also did evaluate the project consistent with the housing element update initial study that was done in 2011. So both of those documents were utilized in evaluating it. And the takeaway here is that there really aren't any new impacts that were associated with this project that we hadn't anticipated with the 2006 general plan EIR and the 2011 housing element update initial study and negative declaration. As I indicated earlier in my presentation, Ms. Dana Privet of Kimley Horn, who prepared the addendum, is here to answer any questions that you might have. So again, the project is consistent with the airport area general plan policies, and I went through all of those earlier, but I wanted to kind of leave you with that impression because we went through and looked at it very carefully. We looked at every policy, and the project does meet each one of the policies. So we have the recommended actions this evening. Again, conduct a public hearing, approve the addendum, adopt the resolution that's before you, which makes a recommendation for project approval to the City Council. Our next steps, the Airport Land Use Commission will be reviewing this project at their November 19th meeting. It's our belief that the project is consistent with the Airport Environs Land Use Plan. I didn't touch upon that in this presentation, but this is not in a high noise area. It's not in a safety zone that wouldn't otherwise allow residential uses, and so we feel it is consistent with that plan, but we do need the Airport Land Use Commission to weigh in on that matter. It's required by state law. And so on November 19th, we have that meeting. On December 2nd, as I indicated earlier, Parks, Beaches, Recreation Commission will be reviewing the amenities within the park. And then the City Council would take this project up in early 2021. And with that, I'm available for any questions. Rosalind and I are here to help you, and the consultants are here as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Roz. There's a lot of work to be put on this project, so thank you for your time. Okay, Commissioners, do you want to ask any questions before the applicant gives a presentation to staff? Ask questions for staff.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes, sir.
I must say, staff, this was a lot of material that we received on Friday to be prepared for tonight. Very difficult. EIR amendment, traffic analysis. I don't know how many hundreds of pages to go through in the document. It's a lot to take in, so be prepared for a lot of questions from people and from us. Let me start with the beginning. Doing some reading on some of the material, letters in, there's a building with condo office owners. Did they all receive a public hearing notice? Do you think they did?
Commissioner Kenning, we send public hearing notices out to everyone who is within 300 feet of the project site based on the latest equalized assessment roll required by law. And if it's a condo, then the ownership got it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
or well, I should say we mailed the notice to that address. I can't guarantee that they actually received it, but we did comply with the notification requirements.
Very good. In the general plan for this zone, it refers to a term called vertical mixed use. Pretty flexible. How do you define that?
Mixed use vertically is where you typically will have some sort of retail or office on the ground floor, and then you might have residential units above in one building.
This does not meet that standard, does it? Because it's just a parking and residential.
Yes. Now, the general plan does not require that you provide any commercial uses in the project site. The H2 also allows for horizontal intermixing of uses, which means you can have a distinct residential project, with other projects in the area. And so this is a mixed-use development if you think of the entire office complex with residential within it.
All right, so that's interesting. On the development agreement, on the public benefit fees on page 29, is that, I see that they're generously putting up 80% of their public benefit fees right after entitlement. Is that non-refundable?
Yes,
I didn't
it would not be
read it in the
refundable.
document. I read the document. I didn't see it. Now, I may have missed it in the late hours, but
It's my understanding it would not be refundable.
it would not.
It
So
would
it's-
not.
Okay, just curious. Parking impacts. Interim parking area 4, if you could put that up, it's the Meyer employee parking lot.
I don't have that exhibit. Commissioner Kenning, I don't have that exhibit in the presentation.
Oh,
I
it's on
can-
the site, though.
I can put it on the site plan here.
Yeah, that's all. So we can just talk about it for a minute.
maybe this one would work. Not sure where that parking area is. Now, I can say that the applicant does have a detailed presentation, and I know they're going to be going over
All right.
parking.
We can
They
hold
do
that.
have a parking consultant here to maybe address that, so maybe we might save that for their, they will be able to answer your question. is
Very
my
good.
belief.
The affordable apartment units, very low only. So it's not going to be a mixture of affordable, just very low?
That's correct.
Is that unusual?
Not really.
All right.
I mean,
And 5% is standard?
It just really depends upon the nature of the project and whether a community might have an inclusionary ordinance. But under the density bonus provisions, the minimum, if you provide 5% very low, you're entitled to the 20% increase in density. And that's
Oh.
the way that makes the project kind of pencil out, if you will.
All right. Last question on parking. Is there a standard percentage of for guest parking I didn't see it spelled out in the parking management. They just said will be providing. Is there a standard in our parking ordinance?
Yes, there is. In a density bonus project, within our municipal code, we have standards for affordable housing projects, and this project meets and actually exceeds those standards.
For guest parking, number of stalls?
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you. That's it for now.
Any other commissioner? Commissioner Rosie?
Just a quick question in regards to whether or not we, or staff, went and took a look at any kind of capacity issues from a utilities perspective?
We didn't have any specific studies for capacity in terms of utilities like water and wastewater systems. So the developer has to upsize those lines to the nearest mains in order to accommodate the project. Obviously, there will be an increase of water and wastewater here because there is no land use here at this point in time. We have no indication that it would otherwise be deficient. We do have existing IRWD lines, and we do. The applicant has indicated that IRWD can and will serve the project.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that.
Commissioner Klostermeyer?
I have a question about the affordable housing unit mix out there. You mentioned a concession. The units aren't in alignment with the market rate mix.
That's correct.
And just a question, reviewing the public benefit fee, which is 7.5 million, when you look at the breakdown of that, there's $1 million of that's going to be placed into a separate affordable housing fund. Was
Yes.
consideration given to that dollar amount put in place for the concession that's being offered in the unit mix?
There really was no analysis of that concession versus the offer and the public benefit fee. No, there really is no direct correlation between the two.
And does the city have any plans for how they would use that affordable housing fund money?
We do not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then I just had a few questions, and maybe they could be answered by the applicant too, so if they are, just tell me. Park hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., why not dusk to dawn?
Yeah, the conditions do state 8 to 8. That is the applicant's desire. City parks have different hours. I believe they're 6 to 10. Hopefully I've quoted that correctly. It was our intent to use the city municipal code in this regard. I think the applicant would like to have lesser hours due to the proximity to the residences there. My thought is that we might want to have a PB&R commission weigh in on that, and then take that recommendation to the city council, and then we'll figure that out then.
Great, yeah, that'd be good, because some tenants come to work earlier and some stay later, and based on time change, we're just observing now that 8 maybe is too late in certain days, and 8 might be too early on other days, so. What's the parking ratios for the units? Is there a standard to that, or is it based on studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom? What are the, and then are they applying this parking ratios to the mixed use that exists there currently, or will those be adjusted?
So the the parking for the existing office uses is established in the Cole Center Newport Plan community. It's 4 per thousand, and so that will be retained in the project after construction. The residential component is reliant upon the density bonus parking standard, and that is a scale based upon the different types of units, whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units. I don't know the precise ratios off the top of my head, but I do know that the project does exceed the parking standard that would otherwise be required by quite a number of spaces. And I think maybe the applicant can elucidate on that.
Great.
point.
And then this new street that exists, and it has access to parking, is that parking paid or is that free parking? Like, let's say you wanted to go to the park and park through that. That's how you would access to get to the park, right? This new street that hasn't been, internal street is what it's listed here on the map. Is there a charge to park? Will there ever be a charge to park? To visit that park, or to access that new structure maybe? What's the paid parking like in this?
So all of the parking in Cole Center Newport is controlled. I don't know their parking rate policies. I'm guessing that certain tenants, they have validated parking, but their guests might have to pay. I don't know, maybe the applicant can let us know on that. The park itself doesn't have parking that's dedicated to the park. But the internal street will be open to the public, and there are 10 spaces that are parallel along the street. And so anyone can park there. It's short-term parking, that's the intent. Obviously for loading, whether it be for Uber and Lyft pickups, but people can park there short-term. And so someone could park there and they can walk around the building to the public park. Now, the park would also be accessible by any of the employees that are in the adjacent office buildings. It's just a short walk along the pathways that are existing, and they will be connected to. And so there will be accessibility from all the office tenants in the area who might want to walk on their lunch hour or what have you, and obviously the residences. Now, the public going to this park, they would have to park, along that internal street. There is no parking on Birch or Von Carmen.
And then to get to the parking structure, is that going to be a paid parking structure?
I'll have the applicant address that question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious also what tenants that parking structure satisfies. What building do most tenants plan on parking in, or structure do tenants plan on parking in to go to what businesses? So just kind of the flow there. If they're dedicated for the properties more that are close to the development on the other side of the parking structure, that's a significant walk. So while the number might be being satisfied, does it flow for the entire community there? There could be a shortage at those 3 buildings that are at the furthest part of that picture from the structure. So I guess maybe the applicant could describe how that flow will exist.
I think that would be best for the applicant. Their parking consultant is here. They designed this to be, some of the parking in the building to be proximate to some of the existing buildings, and I think they would be best to tell you who that parking is dedicated to.
Great. And then if the concessions weren't made for the affordability component, what would it look like? What's it supposed to be if the concessions didn't exist?
Well, I don't know the precise number of units, but we would have fewer 1-bedroom units and more, probably fewer studios and more 1- and 2-bedroom units.
Gotcha.
And so that just affects the income stream over the 55 years, and it becomes quite a large number, if you will. Probably far more than the $1 million of the affordability that's coming in as well. So through the development agreement.
Okay. All right. I will ask our commissioners for ex parte communications before I go and open the hearing. Commissioner Rosane, you want to start?
I did meet with the applicant and toured Uptown Newport.
I met with the applicant, toured Uptown Newport, and then I had a follow-up phone conversation with them.
I had a tour of the Uptown, listened to a small presentation, and spoke with the applicant.
Great. And I too met with the applicant on site at Uptown Newport, had subsequent phone calls with the applicant, and also spoke with members of the opposition too. There were a few phone calls that I had with folks with Spawn and folks with the neighboring tenant, Olenikov. So I will move on to the applicant. I will first open the public hearing, and I'll invite the applicant to make their presentation.
Good evening, Chairman Weigand, Commissioners Ketting, Klostermeyer, and Rosine. I'm Greg Nakahira. I've been with Ken Pacern for the past 30 years. First off, we'd like to thank city staff, Simone, Jim, Rosalind, and many others for their dedication, hard work, and professionalism in guiding our team to bring this development before you tonight. And of course, we'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their public service to the Newport Beach community. In addition, we'd like to thank Scott and Jerry from the coal company and all the owners who have provided their support, the owners of 4490, 4400, 4350, Von Carmen, and 5000 Birch. However, we do not disparage the few who have sent letters of concern to the Planning Commission, as they have provided valuable feedback. I want to take a moment to introduce the Pacern Group. Most of you know the Pacern Group is a family office for Ken Pacern, headquartered in Newport Beach. Prior to founding the company in 1988, he worked for his family's company, Pacern Real Estate Group, which was founded in 1925 and has a diversified portfolio of commercial assets, market rate, and affordable apartments. Ken continues to own 20% of his family's company. And I think, as most of you know, we are the developer of One Uptown Newport. We take great pride in being thoughtful urban planners. It's one of the core values of our organization. And we're very fortunate to have an executive team comprised of leading industry professionals. Long-term ownership. The one question which I would contend is underappreciated in planning meetings such as this one is, who is the long-term owner? Are they an absentee owner that lives in another state? Will they continue to invest the capital necessary to maintain the quality? Are they a private equity investor in New York City that cares more about their return than the community in Newport Beach or the building residents? Are they simply going to sell the property or rights to develop the property to the highest bidder? Ken lives in Newport, and he's raising his family here. He is fully committed to doing what is responsible for the city. A behavior that we've noticed among our fellow developers is they attend the state of city events only when they're seeking approval of their projects. We attend every one and support all the state of cities in all the cities that we invest in. As long-term investors, there is nothing more important than the state of the cities that we are community members in. One of the major ways TPG supports cities is giving back through the Pacern Family Foundation. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline which Jim Campbell had walked you through, so I won't reiterate it. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, our community outreach. This is a list of all the folks that we have spent time speaking with and meeting with. We did have a great head start in that the community had voiced their opinion back in January of 2019 against the prior applicant, and they were very specific about what they felt was appropriate for the site, and that really did help us in many ways. The last thing I will mention is Despite Ken's success, he is accessible and willing to engage with anyone from the city council to community member activists. He's not sitting in an ivory tower, but he's willing and ready to get into the arena. With that said, I would like to introduce Ken, who will provide an overview of this project.
Thank you, Greg. So we have a project that is approved for residential use in a parking lot and in a city with a very sophisticated staff and community. This is a great example of smart urban renewal, but we knew that this would not be an easy execution. However, we believe that if we approached design with an eye toward the sort of urban redevelopment that is compatible with existing uses, we could make it work. The first step was to work with the city staff to define what they believed would work. A project that makes a contribution to their state-mandated RHNA requirements. Of course, we all know that the very low affordability is very important because it's very, very expensive and very difficult to provide. But the other 299 units also go toward the RHNA requirements. A building that is compatible with the surrounding uses with regard to height, massing, and quality. A site plan that creates a campus setting between the residential and the neighboring buildings through the use of a centralized park. A project that complies with existing CC&Rs, particularly as it pertains to parking. Of course, this issue is of paramount concern to the coal company, given that they are the declarant for the Kohl Center Newport and the current owner of most of the common area parking areas within Kohl Center. We appreciate their support. The second step was to meet with the community members and adjacent building owners. As you know, in this kind of process, you meet folks who occupy a continuum from very welcoming and supportive to those who are resistant to change and some who are opportunistic. We believe we have approached everyone with a willingness to listen and collaborate within the context of reasonableness. Our team, starting with our architect, Irwin Yao, will now present a project that we believe accomplishes our original goals and has the support of the city staff, the Kohl Center, and the vast majority of our neighbors. Thank you.
If we can move on to the next slide, please. Good evening. My name is Irwin Yao with TCA Architects. I am the principal architect on a residential project working with the Princeton Group. My firm has worked with the Princeton Group now on 6 projects, including one uptown Newport. And one thing I can tell you about Ken and his team, they can be a little bit of a pain in the neck. And I say that with love and support because they really want us to continue to dig deep into the details. They want us to really look at improving ourselves and advancing what the architecture can be. And as long-term owners, we work together as a partnership to really try to achieve some excellence. I'm going to try to not to repeat what Jim had presented a little bit before, but to elaborate a little bit on some of the things that he showed earlier. One of the things that we want to be able to point out here is that this is the residential project is a 5-story building with a 1-acre park. It is replacing the surface parking lot, as you can see there. But to point out again that it does open up the 2 internal streets with public access from Birch and Von Carmen, which is currently a gated access. We feel like that is an important aspect to start to create better connectivity around the site and around the entire area as a whole. If you go to the next slide. Again, this is the plan here of the ground level. The main entrance into the project is on the south side here on the internal street. This is going to be adjacent to a big open leasing office and lobby space. The main entry also has a view past the building into the park beyond that. From the north of the project, there is going to be a separate parking entry for the office users into the garage, and they have their dedicated parking spaces. We also have a dedicated lobby space for them that serves just the office users that will bring them up to the upper level and have them right out into the park area. Some of the other amenities to point out on the ground level, we have a dog wash on the upper left, a bike shop and storage space, both of those adjacent to the park area. We also have a handful of units on Birch Street as well. Next slide. This again is the first level of residential units. This is what we call the podium level. And we designed this with really two major open spaces in mind. On the left-hand side there, this is the pool courtyard. Generous in size, it's open on one end. Directly adjacent to that is going to be a two-story clubhouse space and other amenity spaces, and should really feel like a nice resort space. The fitness center in the middle of the page here is located in the center of the project, and it sits right above the leasing office, which will help activate the project on the front entry. And on the right-hand side, the secondary courtyard is designed to be a little bit more of a passive landscape space, landscape and seating, a little bit of a quieter space away from the active courtyard along the left-hand side. Along Birch Street on the upper level, we have a 2,500 square foot roof deck that you'll be able to see from the entrance off of Birch. And overall, our design approach is really to locate the buildings in the open spaces so that the existing office buildings, as well as the residence itself, have open space and landscape to look down to, and we feel that they have appropriate distances away from each other. Next slide. Through a couple of these renderings, we'll do a walking tour around the building. This is a view of the project from Birch Street. You can see the project steps down to 4 stories along this edge with the roof deck above that. This is also the entrance into that internal street that is now going to be opened up to the public. Next slide. This view is from the internal street, really from the Hancock building. You can see how we're applying enhanced materials on the project. We try to emphasize the corners of the project, and we're doing so here with adding stone material. In addition to that, we use other materials and colors to articulate the elevation as it goes down the project. On the garage facade, there will be openings into the garage, and we'll have metal screening elements. But more importantly, in front of that, we layer in landscape and trees to articulate that ground level against the sidewalk. Next slide. This is the view of the entry into the project. The ground level here is the leasing office with a 2-story fitness area above that. This is going to be designed with storefront to really grab your attention and bring a lot of light into that space. The materials above the leasing and fitness area is cementitious panel. We can apply that in multiple colors, so you can see in the gray and in the blue a little bit further along the elevation. Next slide. A view into the kind of the porte cochere. This would be the view. You can see through the porte cochere into the park beyond that. This would connect the residents and users into the park. We want this entrance to really feel inviting and open and feel almost like a nice hotel lobby space. Next slide. Continuing around the building, this is on Von Carmen. You can see a dog run in the park to the left-hand side. Again, we're applying enhanced materials on the key corners to try to bring richness and some texture to the building. Next slide. And coming around the last view here along the interior side of the street, this is looking back at the project from the office building. This is also looking at the park in front of that. The space above that podium is the pool courtyard space. You can also see that the building starts to step back to provide massing relief. There's stone material around that clubhouse space, and then beyond the pool court area, we're providing the cementitious panel on the elevation there. And next slide. In front of the Planning Commission, we have a physical board that we left in front of that podium there. This is the digital version of that. Gives you an idea of the proposed materials. Stone on the prominent corners and the amenity space. Siding used on the internal street elevations. Stucco is used in multiple colors to break up the massing and visual breaks. And then on the entire project, we have accents of metal awnings, screens, and metal railings for the balconies as well. Next slide. So let me pass on this presentation to Tim Stanley. He is the president of Pursuing Group Development to talk about our response to the community input.
Thank you, Erwin. I'm Tim Stanley with the Pursuing Group, and I'm here to speak to how we've responded to the feedback that this project has received from the community over the past few years. Next slide, please. Since January of 2019, when the previous applicant received feedback from the community at a study session at which the project was withdrawn, we've been working to understand the desires of the community and wish to respond to those desires under the following major topics. First, the scale of the building and how it relates to its surroundings. Secondly, the integration of a park that's more central to the development. Addressing the issue of increased affordable housing. And then, as last, the desire for retail within the community, within the project. Next slide, please. One more slide, please. With respect to the scale of the development, as mentioned previously, the project in 2019, which was proposed, was 3 15-story towers with 2 levels of exposed parking garage. As a reference to where the scale of our current project in relation to the old one, you can see the red line on the screen drawn across the buildings, which kind of gives you a sense for how much we have taken down the size of these particular buildings. Next slide, please. Specifically, at that time, too, the community provided feedback and was requesting a mid-rise project, and that's exactly what we have delivered. Our proposed building has a nominal 65-foot overall height, which relates well in terms of size and scale to the surrounding office buildings. Additionally, our presentation of the garage, and this has been mentioned by Erwin from our architect, TCA, has been reduced to 1 level above grade with 2 levels below grade, which allows us to more artfully shield the garage through architectural and landscape features. Next slide, please. One more too. The issue, speaking to the park, in 2010, the concept of a central park was conceived through the ICDP for the airport area. As a part of this project, we've delivered that central park, but more importantly, have used it to buffer it between our project and the neighboring office buildings, most adjacent, allowing for a greater campus environment and feel. Next slide, please. Speaking to the park design, and I know this has been shown already, the key conceptual elements of the park that we're proposing is a 1-acre city dedication, and that park, you can see the dedication is outlined in red. It also includes, on top of the dedication, a half-mile of pedestrian trails that ring the development, and those are the blue dots that run around the development. And that not only provides an amenity for people that want to walk at lunchtime, but it also allows for the ability for people from outside the adjacent buildings to connect into the park. There's an additional connection through the building, which was shown previously through the hotel-style porte-cochere. That's outlined in the thick blue line. And as mentioned previously in the presentation, this park is contemplated to connect through other areas of the office community and ultimately to the Uptown Newport Master Plan. Next slide, please. Taking a closer look at the programming for the park, we're very excited about this. The amenities proposed are a combination of active and passive uses that we believe will both be utilized by both the office and the residential occupants of the area. Some of the key features we have for this particular park is a shaded seating pavilion where people could come out and lounge and have lunch and relax out of the sun, a dog park, and we also contemplate active uses such as bocce and foosball, which have been mentioned before. As mentioned, we look forward to working collaboratively with the city staff to finalize the programming through the meeting in December. Next slide, please. Just to give you a perspective of how the park will look from one of the adjacent offices and the sense of campus feel, this is one of our neighboring properties, and you can see what the building looks like right now, which is a sea of parking, and how it will now gauge into a nicer park setting. Next slide, please. Increased affordability. One more. Thank you. Since the previous application, the community gave feedback about increased affordability, and we've done it in the following ways, and this has been mentioned. First of all, the above moderate units have been increased from 260 units to 299, which helps the city meet its ever-important RENA obligations. Additionally, as mentioned before, the property has 13 very low units at 50% of average median income. What's important to understand about this is that these additional units come at a significant cost of development, as the income that's generated from these units is not enough to even cover the operating expenses for these units before debt service. To give you a sense of the subsidy of where the affordable rent is to where market rent is, over the lifetime of this affordability, the subsidy is somewhere between $10 and $12 million in terms of the subsidy providing for affordable housing. However, the project is taking advantage of a density bonus, which offsets to some degree the subsidy of the project by allowing us to allocate the cost of the land and the parking that's provided to the office over a greater amount of units. And when you think about this offset, that allows an offset of about $4.5 million. So you're talking about a net subsidy to the project of about $6 to $8 million, which is fairly substantial. Considering that we needed to add this density in order to mitigate the subsidy to the project and the size of the subsidy, and to consider the fact that this project provides a 1-acre park dedication, there is a lot of programming that's going into providing responses to the community needs. And I would point out too that the bonus density that we are providing is the minimum that we can take. I mean, it's the maximum that we felt appropriate for the size of the project. Given all these factors, the request for retail and its parking that's required is a programmatic element that we did not feel the project had room for. And as such, it is not included in this project. This compromise, given the retail climate that exists today, albeit a poor retail climate, and the compromised location of this project with respect to retail in terms of its lack of drive-by and relative insular feel, make this a reasonable compromise to make for the project. Next slide, please. We'll speak to parking. We have received feedback from the community, including SPAWN and one of the office owners, regarding parking, and we want to walk you through our parking plan. A key part of this plan was to obtain Kohl's approval, who owns and controls and administers the parking, and we have achieved that approval at this stage. Now, to provide greater detail about the parking plan, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Tony Petros with LSA to speak to parking.
Chair Weigand, fellow commissioners, my name is Tony Petros. I'm a partner at LSA, and I am the principal in charge of our mobility and parking group. I want to just, as a bit of background, I've provided parking consulting services to clients such as the California Angels, the California Speedway, Pebble Beach Company, Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, and for years I was the parking consultant to the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival. So this is right up our alley. This is very awkward to look at you through glass instead of being right before you, but nonetheless, I want to assure you that LSA had provided a comprehensive parking analysis of this project, but I want to underscore a few of the items before we get into that. As has been provided for already, The property is governed by PC text, which allocates parking 1 space per 300 square feet of commercial use. The coal development does own this property, and they have given their consent to this plan that has been prepared and our analysis that has been provided. And each building has been allocated parking based upon that allotment. So, for example, the Pacern Group themselves hosts about 16,000 square feet of use in the Hancock building, and they have apportioned parking according to that. Next slide, please. I want to just underscore two fundamental parts of this project. That is that there is a development and parking field to the north and one to the south. And when looking at the footprint of the parking, all of the parking is being replaced. Surface parking, exposed surface lots, are being replaced in kind with structured, covered, secure, structured parking. And in fact, in excess of what is out there. Right now, there are, in the footprint of the development, there's about 549 spaces. 560 spaces will be replaced. So there is parking replaced in kind with the plan for a buffer. Next slide. Our analysis focused on two parts. First and foremost, what was the requirement for parking? And as summarized in the slide that you have before you, when looking at the northerly locations and the square footage of the building, there's a requirement for about 435 spaces. We're returning 475 spaces in that general location for a buffer of about 45 spaces. Speaking to the southerly portion, with the construction of the parking structure to the south, there would be an additional 155 spaces provided in surplus. Today, about 483 spaces are there in the surface lots, 483 spaces would be required for the uses that are served there, and we're returning 638. So again, a surplus. The point being that when reviewing the statutory requirements, all of the parking is being returned with the plan for a surplus. But that's not where we ended. Next slide. We wanted to go out and make sure that we understood what the demand for parking was. So back in July of 2019, pre-COVID, we had conducted over an entire week for a 12-hour period, every half hour, parking surveys of all of the areas that you see highlighted in this slide. And what we found was that at no time did any of the parking areas reach 100% utilization. Chair Wiegand, to your question, the area that is referred to as 8, at maximum during that entire week, at maximum, had a peak utilization under 70%, while those buildings happened to be 90% occupied or higher. When you look across the entirety of each one of the areas, the peaks occur at different hours of the day. Yet if we stack all of those peaks one on top of each other to provide a conservative estimate, we're looking at a utilization across the entire site of under 60%. This, while in aggregate, the office buildings are at about 80% occupancy. So even if you assume full occupancy of the buildings, there is still an adequate supply of parking given not only the actual statutory requirement, but the actual demand for parking as used today. I also would point out that this is good planning. The parking structure is being constructed prior to the development of any use, making sure and certain that there is adequate parking for the duration of the process and project development. With that, I'd like to return the discussion back to Ken.
Thanks, Tony.
So again, in conclusion, I would like to thank our team. They are a very hard-working group of folks. I'd like to thank the staff of the City of Newport Beach. They are also a very hard-working group of folks. They are not easy. We don't want them to be easy. They negotiated, they collaborated, and we think we came to a nice project that suits everyone's needs. In closing, we ask the Commission to allow us to move forward without delay. Housing delayed is housing denied. We have a fundamental and critical need to build more housing. There is plenty of time between your decision and Council's action for these private party economic compensation and parking documentation issues to be negotiated. We, as always, commit to continue to work with our neighbors and other interested parties to address remaining concerns. And of course, all interested parties can raise any remaining concerns to Council if we have not reached a mutually satisfactory agreement by that time. Please take this opportunity to vote for this high-quality development that the City of Newport Beach will be proud of, and for the inclusion of very low-income housing units. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask commissioners if they have questions of the applicant. Yes, Commissioner Klostermeyer.
I have some questions with respect to the parking. You noted in the parking presentation that 200 surplus parking stalls are going to be provided out here. I understand that replacement parking, especially when it's structured, is quite expensive, and I'm just curious about the rationale to provide the excess parking.
The rationale for that. It's simply a matter of space and location. There's an obligation to replace all the spaces, and in the limited space that's available, the structure is the rational solution.
I guess I'm just curious why you're providing so much excess parking. It sounds like it's a great amenity, just surprising to me.
The criteria was to replace every parking space. And we have done that with a slight surplus of 11 parking spaces. Therefore, the 200 parking spaces that you have identified as surplus could be used by Hancock, by the Hancock building, albeit you can see by virtue of Tony's parking study that they don't need it. But the Kohl Center, in partnership with us and in collaboration with us, insisted that we replace every parking space. In addition, it is in the CC&Rs as well.
Okay, some more follow-up questions on parking, and I think Chair Wygan alluded to this earlier. Could someone maybe walk us through the parking that is going to be provided in the apartment podium structure and how that is going to be gated between office and residential use, and there's going to be any free parking provided in there for residents that want to use the public park, or if you're always going to have to pay for parking in there?
Yes, if we can pull up maybe the ground level plan. One right before this one. Thank you. The building itself is going to have control access. So the residential entry off of the internal street will come through, and you'll be a gated access pull a ticket for the residents to go in. Then there is a ramp along the upper right-hand side that takes you down to the lower level, in which the parking for residents is primarily on the lower 2 levels. For the office parking, it's a secured or a gated access already. Their access is coming in from the northern side of the parking structure, so they're already behind gates. So even though there won't be gates for them to come into the structure itself, they're already behind kind of a access point.
So I assume office patrons then do pay to park here?
Yes, they will still be part of the parking system for our call center as a whole.
And is there any public parking that is going to be provided free of charge for anyone that wants to come use the park?
The only parking that would not have a gated access is the 10 parking spaces along the south side of the project, the parallel parking spaces, and is meant to be temporary parking spaces adjacent to the sidewalk.
Okay.
I guess while you're on that, how many minutes is temporary parking?
I don't think we have that specifically identified yet. But it is a non-ticketed parking space on the street there.
Let me just, while staff is maybe looking into this, is this something we would condition if we wish to have it for a significant period of time for a patron that, this is a city park technically, so, some parks charge, as we know, Marina Park has charging, but, are the rates comparable to those rates? And then the free parking, is that fair to a resident in Newport Beach who wishes to utilize this park to be restricted to 20 minutes, if that's what temporary is? Would we be able to condition the temporary parking to a specific time? Is that a Parks, Beaches, Recreation Commission discussion? Where does that fall in, I guess, to the discussion? If this is a city park, we want our residents of the city to have access to it. 10 temporary spaces is pretty limiting to an average resident. I'm not saying the average resident would go to this park, but that's what this park is supposed to be. Sorry for interrupting on your question.
Chair Wagon, those are all very, very good points. We have not, we've just considered this parking really short-term parking. We had not thought to limit it to any one particular time period. It would generally be used for loading, but whether it be a half an hour or an hour or something along those lines might be appropriate. We may be able to do it time sensitive, so maybe it's a longer time period overnight. I don't know. I guess we could have that conversation with the traffic engineer and with the applicant and come up with a better recommendation for the city council, and we could share that with Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, so we can ensure that we have some spaces there.
And I've got one final question. If you could pull up the site plan that we just previously had up. I'm curious to understand the dimensions between the apartment building, actually the slide before this. I'm curious to better understand the dimensions. Yeah, this one. This one, yes. I'm curious to understand the dimensions between the apartment building and the 2 adjacent offices. They look like they're pretty close, and I'm just curious to hear the thoughts of how you viewed that from a design perspective, and if you also met with the adjacent office owners to discuss that.
The dimensions that you're seeing there is dimension to the podium level. It's a little deceiving where that is just a one-story element within the project. Above that, where the pool area is, obviously the 4-story apartment portion sets quite a bit further back. The dimension is also just to the property line, not to the building itself, the office building itself. So there's an additional 15 to 20 feet beyond what that dimension is shown right now.
So the total would be, what, roughly 35 feet between the apartments and the buildings over there?
Which dimension are you referring to?
Specifically the courtyard one. It's pretty small. It looks like it's 16 feet on one side to the property line and 17 on the other, so it's an additional 20 feet beyond that.
Correct.
And did you meet with any of the adjacent office owners to discuss, that dimension with the apartments being adjacent to the offices?
Yes, this is Tim Stanley, and yes, we did. I'd like to, we met in particular with the owner of the office structure on the right-hand side, which is at the closest point to our building. That's the Alenikoff building. And we have a slide that we can queue up that was at the end of our presentation to show how we've been responding to their concerns regarding relocating a stack of units. So could you pull up a slide at the end of our presentation after the conclusion, please?
Ken, I have to apologize. I queued that up at the first presentation, and when we changed it out, I failed to put that in there. I apologize for that. But
That's all right, I can speak to it. If you look at the closest pinch point between the Alenikoff building, which is on the right, and our our current structure, the distance is nominally around 40 feet, I believe. There is a stack of units that's right next to the stairwell that's located there on the right-hand side. We've heard their feedback about the proximity of our building to their building, and we have offered up a solution where we could relocate that stack over to the far left of the project where there is greater space, and that creates a greater distance between the buildings and allows for greater sight lines. And that is a discussion that we've been having with the neighboring property owner.
And did you have any discussions with owners of the other office building in the adjacency of the apartments?
We have had discussions with the other owner, and we do not have any issues of adjacency that they have raised or they are concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ketting?
Yes, sticking with parking for a minute. One space for a studio, one space for a single family, pardon me, a one-bedroom, and two spaces for a two-bedroom. I would imagine, what happens when that one bedroom has two people in it? Where do they park that other car? For example, in the evening, is the office parking area on level 1 available for that?
Chair Ketting, if I may respectfully respond by saying that the project itself provides parking in excess of what the parking code would require. So for those unit types, we are providing greater parking than the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code would require. In fact, in aggregate, the project provides 1.8 spaces per unit. That's greater than some of the more recent applications that you've entertained. That's greater than many of the uses within the greater airport area. And it's far greater than many of the uses that I've surveyed throughout the Southern California region. If you have a question specifically about that particular use, I might suggest that we revisit the municipal code.
All right. There was a question, I didn't hear the answer. The office parking, is that for fee or is it open?
Office.
Chairman, Planning Commissioner Ketting, the office parking is gated and controlled like any other of the parking in the Kohl's Center.
All right. Couple of questions on some of the items in here. One, there is a term called fire operative lane, or Jim, help me with that. It's between the two buildings, existing buildings. Is that going to be a lane where the fire truck could back into?
Yes, it's precisely what it is.
And I walk that space, the grade differential is quite a bit right through there.
Yes, so the applicant will be required to provide that fire lane, so a fire truck can back down and then get within their 150-foot hose pole standards for fire protection. So it's a mandatory item there.
All right. Question for the architect and maybe roll over to engineering. When you look at those two adjacent office buildings, they sit at a higher level, quite a bit, maybe 4 or 5 steps or 6 in some cases. From the edge of their building footprint to their property line, what's going on in that area? Today, there's some landscaping and slope and other things. How are you going to try to blend that into the park area, or is it going to be cordoned off?
It's meant to be integrated back into it. There will probably be some level of low retaining to blend in with the existing site there. That includes the fire access road there as well, to make sure that we have full pedestrian access through that space. But it is not meant to feel or look like 2 separate spaces where the property line exists.
All right. Thank you. Question for Ken again. 2 of them, actually. What's the relationship of this part of the entire plan and Uptown Newport?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kettings, say it again,
The
please.
relationship between this part of the entire master plan and the future Uptown expansion over on the, I guess it would be the east side of the property.
Well, of course, it's intended to be one master plan in the sense that it has connectivity. So when Uptown Newport is built out, you will have connectivity between the two. That was the intention. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you've already considered that and started thinking about it in the future.
Okay.
Is this going to be a LEED certified building?
I think, let me defer that to our architect.
Commissioner, at this time, we had not planned for this to be a LEED certified building.
All right. And the final technical question, how do moving trucks get in there and out of there? Street unloading, then dolly it over to an elevator, or can they get in the garage?
We do not intend to have large moving trucks in the garage itself. Along the internal street, there is 2 loading zones that trucks will be able to park in, that is adjacent to elevators for them to move in.
All right, and then the old last question. I see 5 units out that are on the ground floor over there near Birch, and I see they have a hallway going in there from the parking garage. Will they have direct access to the open space areas outside? Like, a lot of the units have balconies. Will they have patios out there or something?
Yes, they will have patios on the ground level that is a little bit expanded. That's typically what we do with units that have ground level access. The front door into those units are still through the corridor behind that, but they will have access out through the patio space as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rosine, anything? Okay. All right, I did have some just follow-up questions on the park hours. I know I had asked staff on that, but was there any desire on the applicant to adjust those hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., more in line with time changes or, dusk to dawn thoughts, or is there a reason for that specific time? And then access, I didn't see any fencing. Is the access to the park completely open, like, say, Mariners Park or other parks in our city, or is there gates in between certain access points? And then parking, if there's was any, ways to address that through maybe some type of analysis that our other parks charge, if there's a way that the automated machines that allow you to come in and out from the new parking, if there's a way to accommodate those park patrons, if I would say, to pay those current rates versus rates that the Cole Center would offer for those that are tenants or those that are guests of tenants. So I'm not sure if that's even feasible or anything, but I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
Chair Wiggin, another question came up. Will the affordable units have the same high-quality interior finishes as the market rate units?
So I'm sorry, I'm getting old. I need to I need to hear I can answer the last question, and the answer is yes. That is something that is absolutely required, so they'll have the same quality, yes.
Thank you for that.
Chairman Wigan, can you repeat your questions and I can try to answer them?
Sure. Parking can costs and time be something done through an automated system that would mirror the costs of our current parks in the city versus those that Cole would regularly charge for patrons of the business. I know that there's a significant charge to go visit those. There's a grace period. But to access our parks, I'm wondering if there's any other accommodations that could be made to a regular citizen of the city.
Are you referring to the 10 parking spaces that have been allocated in the park, or are you referring to the surface parking that is behind the gates?
I think both. If there's the 10, but you want to have a temporary time, I guess I'd like to know what that temporary time to you guys, what you're envisioning. I certainly don't want it to be a freebie for tenants of the building nearby to say, oh, this is a great period of time and go take a lunch and meet these guys and park there and take up parking. But and then as far as your parking in the actual building, could a guest of the park in there with a reasonable cost that mirrors the city's parking rates for other parks in our city?
So let me answer it this way. The 10 spaces are allocated to the park, and we don't control the other parking. We cannot give them access to our residential parking because that would create a security concern. And we cannot give them access to the parking that is controlled by the Cole Center. So we're talking about providing 10 spaces for the park. It is a public park, and therefore we don't want to impose our wishes on the park and recreation folks. At the end of the day, we will do whatever they think is best. Of course, we have residents there, and we don't want noise at hours that are either too early or too late. But that's something that we defer to the city on, and that I think can be worked out quite easily.
Okay. Yeah, because 8 to 8 may be different in other senses, so that would be good for that to be worked out.
Chair Wigan, if I could add, the park hours are set in the municipal code. So as a result, this is a public park, and so it would be required to comply with the park hours that are in the code.
So the conditions in our book should be stricken?
I think we'll need to remove that, correct?
Okay. And then park access on that last park question, is there fencing anywhere around there, or is it completely open from all points of that entire park?
No, it's completely open. Keep in mind, it's a public park. It is not a private park, so it's completely open and accessible to the public.
Sure, sure. I know that some of the parks that we've talked about or have approved have had some fencing, so I just wanted to confirm that. And then height shading to the neighboring buildings, is there any slides or anything that show, when the sun is at certain levels, shading occurs? Are there anything, or is that all in our big pile of stuff?
Yeah, Commissioner Weigand, there was a shade study that was prepared for the project. It's in your packet. I could tell you which sheet it's on if I unroll it here momentarily, but it is there for your review, and it does show that there will be some shadows during certain parts of the day, of course. This is a taller building than the surrounding areas, but it doesn't, in our opinion, affect them in an overly negative way.
We recently approved the Newport Crossings project, which isn't too far from there. Are these building sizes very similar to that project?
That building is a little bit taller, fairly similar. That project is a little taller because it's a wrap product and there's more levels to it, but it's similar in height.
Okay. And then one other question for staff, maybe our attorney could address it. There has been, some significant discussion behind the scenes, not really to us, but an economic impact cost analysis to the Pacerne Group via another tenant nearby. That has no bearing on this discussion this evening. That's a discussion between the applicant and surrounding businesses. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct. I mean, we do have a construction management plan, which should be toward the end of documents. It does talk about and contemplate how it will impact, surrounding tenants and property owners, but certainly, the input that we receive here and at the city council level will, perhaps augment that as well.
Okay, so any discussions that may be had here tonight on that specific topic aren't for our discussion. Just wanted to confirm. Thank you. Okay. Any other commissioner questions before we move on? Okay. I'm going to begin the process of taking public comment on this item. If you're watching remotely on your TV and you want to provide comments, please call 949-270-8165. I think it is mentioned at the top there of the screen. And I will go to the community room for public comments first.
Good evening, Chair Wagon and Commissioners. My name is Nancy Scarborough. I am a board member of SPAWN and a resident of Newport Beach. I have viewed the Pacerne project close by, and it's a lovely project, very nice, very high-end finishes. It's really beautiful. I know that the Pacerne Group has taken into consideration the comments and concerns of the community for the previous project, which was withdrawn, and I think that they have addressed those issues to the best of their ability and probably pretty well. My concern is that when we had that previous project, we were not faced with the state-mandated housing requirements. So now we have 4,834 affordable, low-income, very low-income, moderate and above moderate required units. If we assume that half of those, it's about half of those, 2,400, have to be low and very low income, that means that 2,400 units are going to have to be low and very low income in the city of Newport Beach. We're addressing 13 of those here at a ratio of 5%. If you apply that ratio overall, we're talking about 49,000 units that we would have to add to our city in order to have the state-mandated low and very low income units. Now, that is not Pacerne's problem. They didn't come up with this. We've got a legislature that's bound to implement this. So I do think that it is incumbent upon the city planning department, community development, planning commission, and the housing committee to review these projects in that light and consider the overall impact of how we're going to deal with all of these and how we're going to accomplish this. And this project may be fine. I understand the economics of it. It's difficult to fund those low-income units over a 55-year period without having a high percentage of very high or much more expensive units. However, I think the city needs to have a plan for that, and I think that that needs to be something that we talk about before we start approving small projects throughout our city without an overall plan. We're going to end up having absolutely no land left to be able to meet these requirements. My second concern, briefly, is the retail restaurants and services for this project. I don't think it's necessarily Pacern's problem or responsibility to have those on their project for obvious reasons, for parking. But I do believe that the city should should take a look and consider where they could zone for those kinds of amenities in a close by proximity. Otherwise, we're going to have people living in these apartments who are going to have to get in their car to go to a grocery store 5, 10, 15 miles away. And same with dry cleaner and everything else that they're going to need. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint presentation, but before I have you put that up, my name is Adriana Forche, if you want to find it. But before I have you put that up, I actually had a question which I'm hoping could be addressed maybe at the end and not take away from my presentation. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, did you want to do that now, or did you want it at the end?
Or I could do it at the end. It came up because of all when the presentation. Do you take questions at the end? Is that what you're saying?
We don't usually do questions, but if it's the chair's prerogative, which I'm
Oh,
the
okay.
chair of, I
Oh,
may
okay.
be able to. So let's do your presentation first, and then
Okay.
let's restart the clock, and I'll give you that opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Adriana Forche. I'm a stakeholder in the Cole Center Newport, and our property is at the 4340 building. I'm also the board member of Von Carmen Owners Association. First of all, I wanted to thank the chair, the planning commission, and everyone who was involved in this involved in the planning of this project. It was obviously a lot of work. Even though the Pacern Group is considered the applicant, I actually consider the coal company a co-applicant because they have a fiduciary responsibility or obligation to protect the property rights of the building owners. And the coal company is responsible to Cole Center Newport and to the Coal Association members. I'm focusing on the freestanding parking structure because I don't have enough time to talk about anything else. From my perspective, it's too close yet too far from the rest of the revised project. And I'm urging the Planning Commission to continue for this project so that we can continue to resolve these issues and have meetings with both the Pacern Group and the coal company. Next slide, please. The report states that there are 164 deficit spaces being relocated in the parking structure, and that the parking structure, from all intents and purposes, is replacing the 5,000 Birch spaces. So if that is the function, then it makes sense to move the parking structure closer to 5,000 Birch. Next slide, please. Okay. The coal company allocates our building 197 spaces, but when I looked out in the parking lot, we only have 176 usable spaces near our building. We are short parking spaces. Also, I noted that John Campbell indicated that the coal development's parking ratio is 4 spaces per 1,000, but in the presentation they mentioned a different ratio. It's really unclear to me what we have going on. If you look at that slide there, you can see my calculations splitting it in the middle. Nevertheless, if you would, next slide, please. It looks like the city codes and the CC&Rs would actually require approximately 250 spaces for us if we were the applicant. Here are my reasonable asks, and that's to have the coal company provide an accurate accounting of the usable parking spaces and to fix the existing deficit parking as part of the integrated development plan. I actually reject what the LSA analysis because they didn't take into account other factors, and taking 1 week out of a summer when a lot of people are on vacation, et cetera, is not accurate for their parking. Next slide, please. Lastly, I would ask the applicant to consider repositioning of the parking structure because it's too close to us and it's too far away from the other building, 5000 Birch. Thank you.
You may continue.
Okay. That's why I'm asking the Planning Commission to continue the hearing so that the stakeholders can work with the coal company and the applicant. If the development is poorly executed, future infill proposals will be rejected by businesses and community groups. It serves everyone's interest to do this one right. Thank you very much.
And which property, if we're looking at this slide here, is yours?
Oh, it's the one that's 4340. It's the one that has the solar panels on the top of it.
Okay. And you said you had a question to ask?
Oh, yeah, the question. Yeah, it's related to parking. When you guys are talking about the residential parking and going through the ratios of one space for this and that, and at the end of the day, it's 1.8 total average. And then the comment from the LSA specialist was that all the other projects around have about the same or more or less or something. My question, is there any availability of street parking besides those 10 spaces for the park? Can people park on Von Carmen or Birch or anything for street parking?
Okay, we will ask staff that question. That's an appropriate question to ask.
Excuse me?
That's an appropriate question to ask, so thank you. I will
Okay,
ask
thank
staff to address Von Carmen parking and not any other streets.
Sure. Presently, Von Carmen and Birch do not allow any street parking, and whether it's possible or not, or advisable, I might want to turn it over to Tony Bryan for more input.
No, I would say that we would not have plans to park on Von Carmen or Birch.
What's the speed limit of those streets?
You know, I'm not certain. I want to say Von Carmen is probably 40, Birch, 35, 40. I'm not certain.
Is 40 too high of a speed limit to usually have street parking in that sense?
Yes, and then given the location where it is, and there's really not immediate adjacent businesses, et cetera, it's an arterial road that we would not typically park.
And if there was a process involved to decide to park, what is that process? Let's say we approve this without that discussion, or would, if there determines later at a later date that there's a lack of parking, how does the process to add parking to those streets get put into the mix?
Well, there's not necessarily a process per se, but we could look at providing some parking on Von Carmen, but typically we wouldn't have parking on a street such as Von Carmen or Birch, but it's not to say we couldn't look at it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Next comment, please.
Good evening. My name is Dana Haynes, and I'm the president of the Von Carmen Corporate Owners Association, which represents the many owners who own office condominiums at 4340 Von Carmen. The concern I'm here to address is that the owners purchased their condominiums based upon convenient surface parking, and half of the building that faces east had views. And the proposed parking structure will block any views, and the owners facing that side will now face a concrete parking structure. We made our concerns known to the previous applicant, Shopoff, but my understanding is that the current applicant's revised design actually moved the parking structure closer to our building. And Shopoff, and also they removed more surface parking spaces. Shopoff, the prior applicant, had promised to build a green wall of some sort that would face the building and shield the obtrusive concrete wall. And I don't know if that's there or not. I don't believe so, but so we haven't really been given any input into the design until we got a call last week. And should the project proceed, as Mrs. Forche commented, we believe the structure should be relocated closer to the 5000 Birch building, or the other buildings that it's meant to service. And possibly it's a partial moving, that part of the structure stays in our area and part of it wraps around closer to the Birch Building, but further away from our building. And I would add that in July 2019, when the parking study was done, many of our owners hadn't even moved in yet. They were still doing work on their office condos. So it's not the parking analysis is flawed in that viewpoint. It's also flawed that the Meyer parking lot next to us is owned by the Meyer owners, and we can't park there. So yeah, it might have a lot of empty spaces in it, but we can't park there. So that's the other issue. So we asked for an opportunity to work with the developer in good faith to address the parking structure issue, but that takes time. Once again, we were just contacted last week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Wigand, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Jim Mosier. I have several concerns about this. First one, I share the concern of Commissioner Ketting that this seems like a very large project to be reviewed by the Planning Commission at a single meeting. And I share the concern of Nancy Scarborough that this very large project is being advanced for approval based on what seems to be an out-of-date vision for the airport area that is actively, we assume, being revisioned so that we can accommodate the housing that we need to meet our RHNA requirement. As she alluded to, the applicant has made it sound like this is very good for our RHNA requirement. You take the 4,834 units, you divide by 312. Sounds like you approve 15 or 16 of these projects. Sounds like a large number, but maybe a feasible number. And then we're all done. But we actually have to accommodate 1,453 very low income units somewhere in Newport Beach. You divide that number by 13, you'd have to build 112 of these projects or find a place for them in Newport Beach. And for the moderate and low income, maybe that number again. I have trouble imagining where we're going to put 200 projects of this size. So it seems that the approval of the development agreement, which allows this developer to put in this very low amount of affordable housing, is insulating them from any program that we come up with. And I am not sure why we are doing that. I also had trouble understanding the presentation that they're providing the connectivity. That is, this is on handwritten page 16. That is in what vision we have, the outdated vision from 2006. And this diagram is showing proposed new connectivity between this and Uptown Newport that's not connecting to the Uptown Newport that's there now, but it's connecting to the Tower Semiconductor Building. And in the future, they're going to put in the connectivity to the part that's there currently of Uptown Newport. Sounds like the plan is backwards. As to the park, it was very good to see that's going to be reviewed as our charter requires by our Parks, Beach, and Recreation Commission. I am a little concerned that your resolution that's before you has some very specifics about what's going in the park. You seem to be approving that tonight. I'm wondering what if the PB&R has a different concept of what should be in the park, how your two disconnected recommendations are going to be connected to each other. I'm also confused about the 10 spaces. The last hour we've been hearing those are now dedicated to the park, but at the beginning, I thought we heard those were temporary loading spaces. And then finally, the architecture. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To me, these look, it may be modern design. It looks to me like boxes with windows. I would say it's undistinguished, unimaginative, and to me, unattractive. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Julie Alt, General Counsel for Olin Properties. Our national headquarters has been located in Newport Beach for over 30 years. We also own numerous office properties in Newport Beach, and specifically the airport area, including the 4910 Birch Building, which is the property closest to and most affected by this project. The original incarnation of this project would have been the largest condo tower ever developed in Newport Beach, and there was widespread opposition from the community and surrounding property owners. The revised property before you is clearly an improved project. Pacerne has taken a much more collaborative approach to listen to affected property owners. Olin is currently participating in ongoing dialogue with Pacerne, and we are working through serious concerns and impacts. However, these discussions are not complete, and the impairment to the property rights and mitigation of the extreme impacts to adjoining parcel owners have not been resolved. Some key remaining shortcomings of the application include a deficiency of 274 parking spaces used by the office buildings that will occur during construction. The plan currently calls for parking the office building's tenants and guests significantly off-site during construction. The project moves Olin and the neighboring property owners assigned parking from what was previously Cole Center common area onto another owner's privately owned parcel, encumbered currently by large mortgage liens, without any legal agreement authorizing such a use, nor protecting the office users in case of foreclosure by these lien holders. Cole has sold this property to a third party. These parking impacts alone would leave the Olin building and others out of compliance with required city parking codes for a significant period of time and possibly permanently. Further, the project lacks any detail on integration of parking with existing offices. The project lacks retail, which is deficient throughout the airport area. The plan fails to address nighttime lighting and security in the park, and the plan proposes parking ratios that are far less than the city code requires. City planning documents for this area, such as the 2010 ICDP, require compatible and cohesive integration of new residential with existing office properties. There is no way to ensure compatible integration with these 300+ units unless you give us more than a few days to review the project and respond to the applicant. It was only Friday that staff posted thousands of pages of documents giving affected property owners and the public mere days to analyze complex studies, plans, and impacts to the property rights and the overall character of the airport area. In order to ensure a public process that is not unfairly biased and fast-tracked in favor of the applicant, we ask that the Commission delay a vote and direct the applicant to work out these remaining issues with the community before coming back for approval. A project like this sets a significant precedent for the airport area, and this is an opportunity to set quality neighborhood integration standards for all future residential buildings in the airport area. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm Fred Forshey. I have a PowerPoint.
Okay, I see it. Do you have the clicker or staff does? Okay, perfect.
I'll just, you can call the slides here. Honorable Commissioners, I'm Fred Forshey, a resident of Corona Del Mar since 1979 and an owner of 4340 Von Carmen since 2013. Next slide, please. I'm the CEO of BitCentral, a software company that serves the broadcast industry. BitCentral occupies the 4th floor of 4340 Von Carmen. Next slide, please. We invested in Cole Center Newport because the ambience and excellent views. This is my office looking towards the project where I guess instead of the nice green trees, I'd be looking at apartment windows. Next slide, please. We have a unique lake view for an office park, and this is my view out the front side looking at Von Carmen. And I guess the question is if Cole can take away our views on one side of the building, what will happen on the other side? Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view, and it's hard to imagine how you could cram all those apartments into our little parking lot, but it's also hard to imagine how Cole Center Newport took a common area here, sold it to a third party, and pocketed the money. That's kind of like a homeowners association selling the park and building condos. Next slide, please. So this development will have a negative impact on the surrounding property owners. Cole's primary responsibility should be to these property owners who are paying them as essentially managing the park. Next slide, please. The proposing parking garage would go in this area here, and it would take up this entire area right up close to our building. And next slide, please. And as Dana had mentioned earlier, the second and third floor were sold off as office condos, and there's a lot of attorneys in there, and if they find that their views are now at the side of a parking garage, I think there'll be a flurry of lawsuits. Next slide, please. So with the 3 years of construction in this project, other property owners will have difficulty in leasing their space, and our business will have trouble in just finding places for our people to park. There's been no consideration for the owners in this park who have had this project imposed upon us, and we bought into this park because it was a nice, peaceful, great business aesthetic, and now we have this pushed upon us. So, last slide, please. So what I'd like to emphasize is that the parking garage for 5000 Birch really belongs next to the building it's serving, because most of the people that this parking is replacing are in that building. So we're proposing, you architects can come up with some place, but I'd like to see that also we are underparked. We have run out of parking last year for our building, and would like to see that this considered. So thank you, commissioners, for considering the rights of the property owners, and I ask that you please delay your vote on this project until both Cole and Purcern have addressed the needs of the property owners adjacent to the project.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, commissioners and staff way out there. My name is Bill Solomon-Drakis. I'm the president of Affordable Housing Access. We're a 501c3 developer, operator, and owner of affordable housing, and we've been quietly working here in Newport Beach since about 1999. So we know a few things about housing and affordable housing. We're familiar with the Purcern Group. We have partnered with them before with the Uptown Newport project, and we believe that they do provide very high quality housing. And that's the game here tonight, housing. And it's a crisis we face statewide. Housing, housing, housing. And we need as much of it as we can get. So we're not only an advocate for affordable housing, but all housing, because the secret to solving the housing crisis is providing supply to meet demand. And so we're looking down the barrel of 4,000 and more units under our RHNA requirements. And this project goes a long way to meeting that. Would we like more affordable? Sure. But this project requires zero subsidy from the city or the state or any source. In fact, it's contributing $7.5 million as public benefit fee. So if we want to talk about creating more affordable housing, let's talk about what we do with that $7.5 million. But I urge the city to continue keep doing the hard work that it is doing. And it is hard work to create more housing here in our city for all of our residents and for our future residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, I'll go over to the phones. Anyone on the phones? 2 callers. Okay, you're on.
Can
My name is Don Crotty. I'm a member of SPAWN. I'm also an architect planner, and I've had my own business in the county seat of Santa Ana since the 1980s. As we all know, the latest project before us is much lower in height than the original shop-off. And I was on the board to review the original shop-off, and I've been monitoring this project for SPAWN since that time. SPAWN is about collaboration and solid planning. And as my colleague Nancy Scarborough said from the podium only a few minutes ago, with the SCAG RENA numbers, we have an unbelievable task before us. It's going to be hard work to get housing, especially quality housing, that's going to meet all of the requirements that the state has put upon us. And it's going to need all of this collaboration and really good planning that we can get. In regard to SPAWN's review of the project, I'm going to make this statement. The developer has resolved reasonably many of the board requirements of SPAWN and has pledged their support for our overall housing interests and community outreach for the best general plan in which we are all interested. There are still concerns with our neighbors and colleagues, as you've heard, at Cole Center, which raises some issues which SPAWN has stated in our solutions paper. And working with the neighbors is very, very important to us. For example, we know that there are issues with the retention of Myers Company's limited parking, and there are also continued interest in the BIT Central parking issue. We remain open to sitting with both parties, and we look forward to solutions, and our hats are off to the commission for hearing this, but their complete understanding that the really hard work lies ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next caller, please. Okay, you're on.
Good evening. My name is Dorothy Kraus, and I'm a 40-year resident of Newport Beach. Right now, the City and Housing Element Update Advisory Committee are working feverishly to determine where it can put more than 4,800 housing units throughout the city. And many people are looking directly at the airport area as a place to put the majority of those units. This is an amazing time. What an incredible opportunity. But because this is a race to the finish line for the Housing Element Update, I fear the opportunity may be lost. I support, along with many others, a community-wide vision for the airport area that views the region comprehensively instead of considering a project at a time. A piecemeal approach doesn't help anyone and ignores the complexity and uniqueness of this mostly business area. We believe the airport area needs a master plan that is supported by businesses and residents, and that can help meet the city's housing needs. To do this, I would encourage the city to work with an urban planning and design firm that uses evidence-based decision-making tools and powers the art of planning with science and technology. And in the time of COVID, a technology-based approach can really help improve access to the plans, maintain public safety, and offer a digital tool for folks to view concepts remotely. What better time than now to think critically, creatively, and collaboratively to revitalize a geography that will blend the entirety of the mixed uses, ensure plans for the needed amenities to make it livable, resolve parking issues, and adapt to the unique challenges of the area. This planning tool, this master vision, would retain local control and promote comprehensive planning instead of being reactive to projects and allowing applicants to develop the vision one city block at a time. Why am I discussing this here? Well, this fits squarely with where we are tonight on the residences at 4400 Von Carmen project. The city can continue to process projects using a piecemeal approach for the airport area, or it can set a stage with a master plan suite of housing options that beautifully integrates affordable units and even micro units, which provide creative and useful community amenities. This thoughtful planning will make this a place that people want to be. All of this can happen simultaneously. Let's endeavor to plan for our city's future together. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more caller. Okay,
Yes,
you're on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
members of the commission, my name is David Tanner, Newport Beach resident. I'd like to have a response to a question of how this project addresses the potential for accessory dwelling units. As you know, state law permits accessory dwelling units. It requires our housing element to address accessory dwelling units, and it prohibits the city from preventing those. They're ministerial approvals. So accessory dwelling units for this project have the potential to basically double the population that could live in this project, and that could result in significant environmental impacts. So I'd like to know how this project addresses this potential caused by a change in circumstances with the new state laws. And the second question that I have, and I'd like an answer to, is how this project meets the general plan vision statement of reducing average daily traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that was addressed in the previous agenda item on the circulation. So, okay, any other phone calls? Okay, all right. I will bring it back to the commission for discussion. Does the applicant get a rebuttal period? I'm sorry, I think I missed that on my cheat sheet you gave me, but I will allow the applicant an opportunity to have rebuttal on any of the concerns from the public.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to let Tony talk about the parking briefly, and then I'll pick up where he leaves off.
Again, Tony Petros, LSA. First, the comments regarding the temerity of our parking study. Please know that we have a full week of surveys, whereas the city might ask us to do a day or two. You have a full week. Regardless of whether it was in the fall or in July, we have shown you through the evidence and the data collected that there is ample parking throughout. Any seasonal variation would be picked up within the 30 to 50% underutilization on the site. As it regards to the parking proximity, I've demonstrated to you already that the folks in the northern area have abundant parking available to them. Roughly 30% of the parking that is already out there, the existing use, is available and not utilized. Any addition that would be provided for within the commercial component under the structure would just add to that. So there is, again, abundant parking, both given the current underutilized lots as well as the structured parking that is being provided. I would also say, too, that my firm did not collect the data. We stay arm's length from the folks that are out there making the counts so that there is, in fact, a bit of objectivity between all of that. There was a comment made about the parking code being less. Let's not forget that this is governed by PC text, not the city parking code, not the municipal code, but the PC text over the entire Cole Center site. So we look at it as an integrated site, not as individual uses and who gets what and the like. There was also a comment about the occupancy. Again, we went and explored that and have occupancy rates for all of the office uses there. And according to our records, the the 4340 Von Carmen was approximately 100% occupied during our study. So with that, I believe that responds to all of the parking comments that have been provided.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Hernandez from Holland and Knight. I'm a counsel for the Pasern Group. I wanted to briefly address two legal questions that were raised. One is the issue of whether accessory dwelling units can be added to double the size of this project. And the answer is definitively no. The law does not allow that. As I think many or all of us now know, is you can add an accessory dwelling unit as a matter of right to a single-family home. There is an opportunity. It's much more restrictive for adding ADUs to multifamily buildings, but it's much more restrictive and does not apply here. There's also a terrific case that's now a few years old, Save Round Valley, that confirms in the absence of any reasonably foreseeable ADUs, there is no presumption that ADUs exist. Where ADUs can happen in a multifamily building is where there's surplus space, laundry rooms, storage rooms. Really, it was created for old-style apartment buildings that had a fair amount of usually ground floor, retail, or ancillary space that just doesn't exist here. So I don't think the ADU issue is of concern. Happy to go into more detail if there's questions. The second point, though, really comes up all the time, and it's really, really old law that government agencies can't wait for private parties to reach agreement before exercising their regulatory authority to administer the zoning code. Really old law, I'm talking 1912, Eubank versus Richmond, 1928, Seattle Trust Company versus Roberge. And that law was just upheld again in California in a 5th District case, Court of Appeal, early this year. So we absolutely acknowledge, as you've heard from Ken, that there are issues of concern to local neighbors. Those issues need to be addressed. They're addressed privately. It's a private contract issue. Thank you very much.
I want to clarify one thing that I failed to mention. On the weekend, the Kohl's Center keeps its gates open. So on the weekend, the parking for the park is ample because people could pull into the surface parking lot adjacent to the park and park there. So it's only during the week that they would have just the 10 units on the Spine Street. I want to address some of the concerns and just set the record straight. But could you pull up the slide, one of the parking slides that has the entire area and all of the areas on it, please? Not the one, I think the parking slides are further down. Yeah, they're after this, yeah. There we go. Actually, can I have the next slide, please? Next one, please. That's the one. So if you look at this parking structure, the freestanding parking structure, the folks that own the building or the condo, run the condo association and the building that's adjacent to Area 3, that parking structure on their PowerPoint had Cole 5000 Birch structure. 5000 Birch has ample parking. That is not the issue. They have a garage, that light blue there is a garage, a two-story garage that at peak parking in our parking study was only 30% occupied. They have the orange area that's only 73% occupied. We office there. We know that it is rarely over 50% or 60% occupied. That parking structure is both to satisfy the parking spaces that we are removing and also to serve the buildings on the southern side. So that's the purpose. And they will have more parking, and they will have covered parking. The Meyer building, which is the building in Area 4, and I also might add that the surface parking available to the Meyer building and the condo building, just the surface parking, is 255 spaces, and only 31 of the spaces are reserved for Meyer. So there's ample surface parking, but also ample parking structure parking. I think the issue is more that views will be affected. The views to the, I guess that would be the east. Because in terms of proximity and the quality of parking, it's being improved. Let me address the comments from Julie Alt with Olin. We've been working with Olin for about 2 months. We've sent them 3 letters. We just sent them another letter addressing their concerns. Julie mentioned that the parking will be deficient because the parking in our apartment podium garage will now be private, and that is not the case. Our second story, we have, as we've said, we have a 3-level garage under our apartments. The first level is for residential. We had to make that level residential because that's where our guests will park. The second level is dedicated to office use with a separate ingress-egress and an elevator, enhanced elevator lobby for the 2 buildings to our, essentially our northwest. And Cole will have the legal right of ownership and control for that parking, for that second-story parking under our apartment building or in our podium garage. The construction, the disruption to buildings, to the existing buildings during construction is something that is unfortunately unavoidable. However, we will have a shuttle service from our parking garage. This is the reason for building the parking garage first. We will have a shuttle service from the parking garage to their parking, keeping in mind that they have 199 surface parking spaces that honestly, our office space looks down on that space, and we have our boardroom right there, so we look down on it many, many times per day. And we think they will be served just by virtue of the surface parking. But during construction, if that is not adequate, we will have shuttle service. We'll have 2 shuttles running at peak hours and 1 shuttle running for the rest of the day. Let me see. I think I said this, but the Meyer Reserve parking in Area 4 is 31 spaces of 134 available. So I think that's it. I think I addressed all of the concerns. I, too, agree that that with the state-mandated RHNA numbers, we are faced with a housing challenge. This project, of course, does not have an affordability requirement. It is approved without an affordability requirement. Having said that, at a net cost of about $8 million, we are providing affordability. The problem is that, and I've been in housing my entire life, the problem is we have not had a meaningful housing program, federal housing program that can be utilized by the states since the 1970s. It was the Section 8 program, which ended in about it was supposed to end in 1980, it ended in about 1982. This is something we all have to address. It's going to take collaboration. I appreciate Nancy and Don Crody on the phone addressing this or mentioning this. It will take collaboration from housing specialists, from the community, and from the city to address this problem, although that is a regional problem and essentially not relevant to this project. We are doing the best we can to address that problem, but that is a much larger problem to be addressed in the immediate future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And staff, do you have any comments in response?
Just some general thoughts. I listened very closely to the response about the ADUs from the applicant's counsel, and I actually agree with her thoughts on this. There is a right for that, but I don't think it really would materialize in this case here, and we would obviously honor whatever those rights are consistent with state law. There was one comment about the parking ratios, and I think I made a mistake in my presentation indicating that the parking requirement for this project over Cole Center Newport would be 4 per 1,000. That's actually not the case. The Cole Center Newport planned community has kind of a sliding scale, and so it's an average rate, if you will. I couldn't even tell you the precise rate, but it gets less restrictive as the project gets larger. But in that respect, we've analyzed the parking. It does meet those standards, and again, given the parking information provided by LSA, we don't envision that there will be a parking problem. One of our conditions requires a parking management plan to be developed and implemented if there's a parking problem. And so if we do have some shortfalls in different areas, as Mr. Ken Pacern indicated, they would be doing some shuttling and doing some other ways to make sure that people can adequately park. And that would be incorporated and memorialized in a parking management plan if there was a parking problem. So we feel that we're covered for that. And that's all I really had to say. So, and obviously we're available for any questions.
Great, thank you. And before I close the public hearing, are there any commissioner comments to the applicant? Okay, I'll close the public hearing, and then I'll bring it to the commission to discuss how to move forward and what you want to see. Commissioner Rosie?
Just a quick question for staff. We've heard a lot about parking. It's really not the purview in terms of the relationship between the adjacencies. It's my understanding. I think I heard that. So tell us, if we move forward with this and the applicant changed anything in terms of the location of the parking, saw some alternatives up there just a little while ago, would that have to come back here, or would, since this is a recommendation to council, that be addressed then? And how would that work?
I'll go ahead and take the first chunk of that. We typically, at times, will have modifications to projects that have come before this body, and by the time they get to council, those modifications can be approved by them without having it come back to this body.
Commissioner Keddy.
Chair, yes. Looking at conditions of approval, Just had a couple comments. Item number, well, back to the park hours, that's 13. Chair, you brought it up earlier. Maybe it's a good time to kick that one around.
That's page 258, correct? Handwritten 258?
Mm-hmm. If
Just
that-
to reiterate, the park hours condition will be removed because it is in conflict with the actual municipal code.
I didn't hear you because of this.
It is in conflict with the municipal code, so that condition will have to be removed.
Okay, so that's gone. Item 30, I'd like to insert a word. This is part of the issuance of building permits has to do with detailed landscape plans, irrigation, all that's good. We use this a lot. It should be in substantial compliance with the plans we are looking at tonight. If you could just insert that. I mean, I know there's substantial, there's little flexibility, but I think that should be added. And then there was a question, a condition in here about lighting and noise. That I think it says staff will work on a compliance, test, some sort. Because there was some of the public brought up the fact that there'll be additional lighting around that parking garage. I'm speaking of the freestanding one, not the underground one. Can't remember where I saw that in here. The question is for staff, how are you going to do that? After they build it, look at it? Put shields up?
Commissioner
Glare.
Kenny,
Light
Kenny,
and
we have condition 18, which talks about about lighting fixtures on the roof of the parking structure. The planned community development plan, the regulations in there actually require safe and secure lighting for the interior of that. So it's in uniform. It's actually condition 17. It's also in the planned community text. We typically have conditions about preparing photometrics so that we don't have excessive lighting, but the municipal code actually has a provision there, and that actually would apply in this case. And if it is excessively illuminated, it authorizes the community development director to dim the lights or modify the
All right, well
lighting
then,
plan.
18A also refers to reduce noise from within the structure.
Yeah.
That's all.
What that
But
truly
Ken?
is the existing exterior walls, or the proposed exterior walls to the structure, but also there's usually a wall system along the edge of the parking structure, and that helps reduce some of the noise. It also reduces the light that would emanate from the vehicles, and it's usually open above there, so you have good ventilation.
That is it, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments from commissioners? I'll just ask staff, perhaps on the question addressed on the piecemeal of the area. What's kind of the outlook for the future when we discuss the airport? It's simply just using the group that's meeting right now to formulate a solution down the road for this area, or I guess I just want to get your take on the thought that this is a piecemealed approach versus, there's a general plan that was passed, in 2010 that put this kind of in the works here. So, is it a little too punishing to the applicant to say this is their fault for being piecemealed when this is something we're looking at for the future for that area? I don't think it's their fault that they're in this position to be called piecemeal.
I have a couple of thoughts. Obviously, we have the general plan, which provides for the housing in the area. It comes with a comprehensive set of policies. This project was envisioned and required to do an integrated conceptual development plan, a very specific policy of the general plan, and that led to the 2010 diagram that you saw. Uptown Newport progressed forward consistent with that plan, and this project here is coming back again, substantially consistent with that plan. And so, in my mind, we've done a fair amount of planning for this project area. I think the comments that we're hearing about, the future, we're trying to accommodate a far different amount of housing. And yes, the city is looking to the airport area to provide not only housing, but affordable housing. And I think that, we hear the voices that suggest we need to do some additional planning in the airport area, and I think that might be an area to do in the land use element as we go forward. Once we decide what those densities and intensities might be, then we might be able to work on the form of that going forward through, other policies of the general plan as we go forward. That's kind of my thought of how, we've started to discuss that might be the proper framework to do that. But I think it does seem like it's piecemeal, but our existing plan is a challenging one because we don't really know where the precise opportunities are. And so when the current ICDP was created, we knew we had opportunities with Cole and with Connexon, and that led to the projects that you see here today. But in the other areas, it was really conceptual because we really don't know where those housing projects are likely to occur. And so we could plan for something and have a great vision for it, only to never be realized because it's not realistic. And so, obviously we'll have to do additional outreach with the community and do some additional dialogue with the property owners in that airport area as we go forward and adjust our general plan to accommodate this housing.
Yeah, I think a master approach, with an urban planning sense is a great idea. That was mentioned as one of the comments, but as far as this specific project, I think it's a little late for that. We're talking about the future, and I think the future is wide open and in front of us, and I think that
Absolutely.
we're doing a great job as a city to try to plan for that. But what's before us today is just a little bit something that happened a long time ago that we're just have the opportunity to discuss now. So I just want to bring it back to the commission to it seems like there will be ongoing discussions between the applicant and the surrounding tenants. Like I said before, some of these matters aren't in our discussion tonight, but I think it seems there's a good faith opportunity for the Pasern Group. They're local. They're going to keep the property. They're going to do everything in their power, at least in my mind, that we'll try to be a good partner for that surrounding area. I'm sure that there will be opportunities for some type of litigation against, but that isn't in our discussion tonight. And so I'd like to hear from you guys to see if you think we should continue on and make a motion to support, or if we should discuss if this wasn't given the public enough time, or where we're at, and kind of gauge from you guys.
Yeah, I'll share some of my thoughts. Chair Wagon, I generally agree with what you're stating. I think overall the project and the applicant has done a very good job of evolving what was brought before the commission a year and a half ago to address several concerns with respect to massing and a few other items. I see a lot of public benefit here. There's a 1-acre park that's going to be provided, $7.5 million in a public benefit fee that will be provided. This project goes a long way to helping us meet some of the RHNA numbers and the much needed housing, including 13 very low affordable units. Overall, I'm supportive of the project.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Kennedy.
I too am supportive of this project. It's a vast improvement over what we had seen before. It's amenities, it's detailing, the credibility of the development company. And then for those who didn't get a chance to read the EIR update, amendment number 4, I went through it all and it's clean. Substantial evidence is showing that the environmental circumstances are better than anything that they had planned previously. And they went through all of them. So I think we have a pretty concise, pretty good package here. A lot of work went into it. I can be supportive.
Okay, Commissioner Rossi.
Yeah, so I think staff has done a great job here, and there's a significant analysis of the property. The applicant's bringing forward a creative solution. What's a challenging project? And, it's in an area that's designated for high-density housing. It's an area that's supported generally by the community, that that's where high-density housing should go. And it brings affordable housing to the community, you know, from a project scale and compatibility. It fits within this area, and I mean, we've got a local a local developer and a local operator. That should be an important part of the puzzle. This is someone that's clearly making an effort to be a part of the community. So I'm going to recommend approval as well, and I'd be happy to go ahead and make that motion.
All right, let's do it.
You want me to read the whole thing?
Yes, can I have our attorney just look at our...
I think it would suffice to just specify that you want to move the recommended action.
Great. Then I'll go ahead and say I would like to move approval for the action before us.
Okay, and there was a couple mods that Commissioner Ketting had to, I guess was a word add in that one. We're striking the park, and there was one more?
Sure. Mr. Chair, what we would do is strike condition number 13 about the park hours. We can add the language that Mr. Ketting needs to the condition on the landscaping. I would go so far as to say on condition number 1, we talk about substantial compliance with the plans that you've seen for all the plans. So it's in there, but we can add that. I did provide you with a memo of an updated finding. Actually gave you 2, but disregard the first, but go with the second. So we're modifying condition. Finding. Finding 2. B2R on handwritten page 50 of their staff report. So we're replacing that finding because we have additional information on the clearance of the building heights per the FAA. So we would add that. And is that everything? I think that's everything.
And sorry, just to jump in on this, just one other question. When we had that discussion, the PB&R is going to do the vetting on this, like you had shown in the initial kind of the breakdown of the time frame of where we are in the steps along the process.
Yes.
And so they'll ultimately get a discussion to address the parking of those 10 spots as kind of how it will line up in that discussion of how many minutes are available to those. For, you know, there was initial comment that it was more of a loading unloading versus a, you know, dedicated for the park. So I would like to have that discussion continued to PB&R and allow them to kind of hammer those details out. Is that something we have to
Yes.
write in those conditions too, or is
I
that something that can be a community development discretion item?
Mr. Chair, I think we can communicate that adequately to PB&R staff. The applicant is obviously to hear it. I know the PB&R Commission would be concerned or would want to see where the parking is and maybe if there's a bathroom possibility. Those are the kinds of things that they see. And so I feel very confident that it's going to be brought up. You know, and then with their recommendation for design, so we can probably finalize that for the City Council's approval. You know, barring a complete change, which I don't anticipate, you know, we would not need to bring it back to the commission unless that would be something you would want to see.
No, I just want to make sure PB&R gets a chance to do it. I think there's a lot of times that we undercut that commission, and I want to make sure that they get a full opportunity to weigh in a responsive manner that those commissioners have the opportunity to and signed up for.
Well, very good.
Okay,
I'm sure that happens.
Okay, so I got a motion. Are those changes okay with the maker of the motion?
Yes, and thanks, Jim, for keeping track of all that.
Commissioner Ketting, I saw you reach maybe for the mic.
Well, I remember getting this, we all got this memorandum from staff about the lot line. Is there something that has to be included in this?
Excuse me. No, Mr. Ketting, we inadvertently, the lot line adjustment exhibits were just not included in the final print-up of the packet, and so we want to just distribute that to you, but it's in the recommended action.
You made a motion. I'll second that, the motion with the minor modifications we included.
Okay, and let's call for the vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work. And Mr. Pacern, please do continue to reach out to your neighbors there. I do find it very important, and as it will come to the council, I'm sure those council members will ask how those negotiations are going. So I do hope you continue that discussion for the sake of the community. Okay, we will move on to our next items, which is staff and commissioner items. Item 4, which would be a motion for reconsideration. Are there any motions? Okay. And item 5, report by the Community Development Director or request for matters on which the Planning Commission members would like placed on a future agenda.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll go ahead and give the item. I want to let the commission know we have a meeting coming up on November 19th. We have 3 items on the agenda, one I spoke about earlier, and that is the study session for the circulation element. And then in addition to that, we'll have 2 public hearings of items that you've actually dealt with before, but they're coming back. One is the amendments to the non-conforming signs, and then the other is the amendment related to alcohol uses in the industrial zone. You've seen these before, so we're hopefully wrapping those up. And then that's really the end of my report. So,
I just had a quick question to add to that. So there was a staff meeting, or not staff meeting, but a staff community report on the IG zone amendment related to alcohol. Was there a community hearing or forum or something?
We did hold a community workshop via Zoom. I can't recall the date, but that was several weeks ago, and we got some good feedback from the community using that. I believe we had 20 to closer to 30 people on the call. We got some good feedback from the community as well. So
okay. And is there a way to share that with us in advance of this meeting, or is that something you'll just address in the comments?
We can definitely summarize that in the staff report. If we recorded it, and I believe we did, then we'll be able to make that available to you.
Yeah, you might as well
provide
just
a link to.
Sure. Just share it with us in case anyone wants to take a look at it. Any questions from commissioners on? Yes, Commissioner Kenny.
Jim, I had a question. December 17th shows nothing. Is that a placeholder, or are you going to give us a Christmas break?
I'm going to try and give you a Christmas break if I can. We hold it open, and if there's an item that ripens that really needs to be to meet the applicant's objectives, we try our best. We might have theoretically there could be an appeal that we might be able to schedule. At this moment in time, I don't see an item lining up for it, and if we don't have any additional items, then we'll go ahead and cancel that meeting.
Yeah, to Commissioner Kedding's comment on that, I would request that we do cancel it. It is the second day of the boat parade. It's a time in this community where I think a lot of focus is away from these meetings. So to give the impression that we're trying to do something under the radar, I think it kind of has an issue there. So I would prefer that we cancel it, but obviously understanding that there could be important city business that needs to be handled. So, do use your discretion, but I think wisely it would be best to not have a meeting that evening. And if there is something that's urgent, maybe we can move it up a week before as a special meeting that this commission could entertain an opportunity to support. So just keep that into consideration, please.
You got it.
Cool, thank you. And any other commissioner questions? All right, and anyone from the audience wish to comment on the report? Being none, okay. All right, request for excused absences from any commissioners? Okay, nobody's going anywhere. And that's it, we are adjourned.